Welcome back, everyone. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Morgan Wilson. Morgan is the Web and Discovery Manager at the Australian National University Library, which migrated to Alma in 2022. Before joining ANU, Morgan worked at the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, doing legal research, business research, drafting regulations, and assisting with investigations and policy development. Please join me in welcoming Morgan Wilson.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, before I start, I'd like to acknowledge and celebrate the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and pay our respect to the elders past and present. This is what we're going to be talking about today. Just some background about this research that I did, then looking at some scope notes and limitations with the research. Then there's going to be a quiz in the middle, and it's nothing serious, and it's more for my benefit than for anything else. Just because of this type of format, it's always nice to see if people are really there and are actually listening. And then we're going to be looking at some of the observations that I found when looking at the research. And this will be the main part of the session. And then at the end, we'll close with some questions if there's time. Okay, so yes, we migrated to Alma and Primo in 2022. It was a big job because we also had to implement Rapido, RapidILL, Rialto, and Leganto. And it wasn't an easy project. We didn't really allow enough time, which meant that the work was very compressed and there were some very tight timeframes. 3 years on, there are still some scars. The implementation of Primo VE was a particular challenge for us. One of the things was that Primo just had so many more features compared with what we had previously. And although we were given plenty of information about what we could do with Primo, it was difficult to decide what we should do and what worked best for our faculty and students and the collection. Because of this, and because we're all stretched with this project, we made the decision to roll out a fairly conservative build of Primo, one that looked quite similar to our build of Summit. The thinking was to just get it done, get something up and running, and then later on, when things weren't so crazy busy, we could make improvements. Fast forward to almost a year and a half, things aren't quite so frantic. We have a better idea of how Alma and Primo really work with our collection, and we can start getting back into the headspace to return for a question, what can we do with our Primo build post-implementation, and what should we do? It became clear that to make the case for incremental improvements to Primo, it would be helpful to do some research about how our peers are using Primo. This led to the survey that I'm going to be talking about today. And sometimes I just wish I'd had the gumption to question the ANZREG email list about some of the Primo issues I was interested in. And although as a librarian, I'm always saying there are no stupid questions when assisting our students or faculty, I don't always take this to heart when I'm the one asking the questions. And I was worried that some of my questions were a bit basic. So, but also part of me likes doing my own research before I ask questions, just so I have a better idea of what's out there. Maybe it goes back to my background in the ACCC, where you always do your own research first. And the nice thing about researching different builds of Primo is that most of the information is actually in the public domain. And at this point, I'd also like to acknowledge the work of Elias Levin, who was a Charles Sturt University student who was placed in my team, and he played a key role in the initial research we did in January 2024. And so basically, the research was put into an Excel spreadsheet, and then we applied various filters and pivot tables. And when it came to actually publishing the research, well, Excel wasn't so good for that. And also I wanted to do some work in SharePoint because I hadn't really done much in SharePoint. So I put it into an internal SharePoint site. And that's just one little screen capture from it. Okay. Because this work began for internal purposes, we made its scope to be exactly what suited us at the time. That said, there is some internal logic. Of course, we didn't have time to survey every single Primo library in the world, so the first cut was to restrict it to Australian and New Zealand libraries. This also gave us the benefit of allowing us to use the ANZREG member list. But if there are any major Primo libraries in our region who aren't members of ANZREG, well, they were left out. However, the list of all the ANZREG members using Primo was still too large for us, so we reduced it to just universities. So unfortunately, we had to exclude more specialised tertiary educational institutions and also special libraries and state libraries. That said, there was one exception, the CSIRO. They're our literal neighbours here in Canberra, and so we always like to, see what they're doing and appreciate their work. So, and the final thing I want to mention is that this work will have mistakes. Luckily, I did catch a few while I was refreshing this just in the last week. But when we started this in January 2024, there was no inkling that this would be shared. But moving on, I'm happy to have a conversation about sharing that in some form, with ANZREG and making it available. Okay, now it's time to do this audience quiz. I did practice it, so I am just going to, let me see, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Now, let's go to polls and quizzes. Oh. No. Okay, I'm going to launch this. There are just 2 questions. So I'm going to allow 2 minutes for people to complete these questions. And so I have not seen any answers yet. Okay, yes, they're coming through. So that's great. And this is completely anonymous. So you don't have to worry about, your supervisor or university librarian or anybody else seeing this. Okay. So when it turns 2:05 by my clock, I'll end the poll. So 87 of 117. Wow. Completely happy. It's perfect. That's always nice to hear. And no, it's quite embarrassing and terrible. Okay. I am just about to end the poll. Okay, end the poll. Now let's share the results. Okay, so just looking at this, we can see that most 60% of people in this survey said they're quite happy with their Primo build. And then 35%, neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. It's not great, but it does the job. Only 4% don't like it much at all. And then the second question, which is multiple choice, is what are the blockers preventing you from improving your Primo? And so we've got about half of, so I guess the biggest one is lack of time, and that would definitely count for me. And then the second largest response here was waiting for Primo NDE. And yeah, I agree. And then lack of expertise, lack of budget, internal blockers. So yeah, well, thank you very much for that. And yeah, I'm glad we got that going. Okay, let's go and move on with the presentation. Let's go back to the other screen. So now this is looking at the observations I found. So it's basically some gleanings from the research that I did. Now, the preliminaries is that I want to say that this is going to be a judgment-free presentation. We all have our own thoughts about what works well in Primo and what doesn't. In this presentation, I'm just going to be presenting what I found and generally not my opinions. But there was one exception. If I mention any specific library here for any reason, It's because I was impressed with how they used a certain element. But that said, if I don't mention your library, it doesn't mean I wasn't impressed. There's just too many good things out there to mention here. So I also wanted to say that none of this work is easy. There are often trade-offs involved. And I think it's possible to have a Primo build that does everything for everyone. Okay, let's move forward then. So, and this is actually the biggest area, is about the collection discovery feature. So this is something that's relatively new, and it's actually been taken up very well in our region. So 29 of 39 libraries in the survey are using this. And 10 aren't. They're the ones who have NA, not applicable by the name of their discovery collection. And you can see that different libraries are calling it different things, but the most popular one is collection discovery. And then you can see special collections, featured collections, and then it goes down to some, individual adaptations. And the other interesting thing about collection discovery is that between the initial survey in January 2024 and now, 6 libraries started using discovery collections, including the ANU. We only have 3 right now, but if we keep on at it, then one day we may actually, have as many as some of the other libraries in our region have. So when I say the next slide is the top 10, and this is just top 10 by volume, and I just thought it was an interesting way of looking at it. So Murdoch University have 46 discovery collections, and then University of South Australia 31. So yeah, so some people are really into it, and I think a lot of times is once you start using, you can think, oh, how could we ever live without doing this before? So yeah, it's an interesting feature. This is a chat GPT generated word cloud about the names of the different discovery collections that are being used in our region. And so you can see open is the big one, Aboriginal resource. Actually, I probably should have removed that as a stop word. And yeah, lots of interesting things here. So there are some collections that I saw used again and again by different libraries, including open educational resources, OER, rare books, theses, study skills, and also, the local university presses. Yeah, so there are quite a few, ones that are just being used again and again. But I wanted to point out some interesting ones. So here's a list, and that I just thought, oh wow. And the referencing software is an interesting one. There are different ways that people kind of distribute their EndNote, and I liked the way that the Uni SA were doing it. And yeah, and I just have to share some screenshots of some of these because especially the puppets, it just really made me smile. But this one, if you want something a bit, yeah, yeah, that's a pretty cool way of, displaying this specific information. And you can imagine how difficult it would actually be to find this if you weren't using these collections. I mean, if your regular student did a search and they didn't know about how to restrict their search to kids, how would they find this? So these are really good for this sort of, specific sort of set. And then the puppets. So yeah, that's just yeah. So again, Calico Cat. I mean, there's just I don't know, and you can see 116 in this set. So that's something to look at. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the research assistant. This is fairly new, and it was only released in the second half of last year. Right now, only 7 of the 39 surveyed libraries are using it. The ANU activated this feature over the summer break. And yeah, there was a bit of discussion about, well, do we really want to be embracing this or not? And we decided to turn it on and see how it went and see if there are any problems with it. And that, if there are problems, we can always switch it off later. And I mean, the thing that I guess I like about it is that um, it provides a bit more of a Google-like search option. If you do a regular search in Primo VE and you try to do a Google search in it, you won't get good results. But the results here are a bit more like that. And we can have lots of conversations about, you know, AI, generative AI in various library products. And yeah, but I think this is actually a fairly modest offering. And I do like how it passes your search results to say, well, if you're doing this, you could do this actual search and you get these results. But again, this is something where, everybody will have different opinions. Okay. The other thing I looked at and I was interested in, and that I'm hoping we can implement soon, is for fetch item search. So this is where you can basically put in a DOI or a PMID, and yeah, you can do a fairly easy search this way. And the nice thing about it is that it will search things outside of your collection. As you can see in some of the different names for it, request non-CDU, that's Charles Darwin University, item. So, um, and so if it's something that is not actually held in your collection, and if you have Rapid ILL enabled, you can actually do that type of request there. And it avoids, it's quick and easy. And yeah, so that's one of the benefits from this. And you can see that only, 25 of the surveyed libraries are not using it. Of the ones who are, you can see that it's called by different names: citation search, citation linker. Yeah, so that's just something I want to mention. Okay, newspaper search. Again, this is something that's relatively new, which hasn't really been taken up very well. And so 29 of the 39 libraries are not using it. And but yeah, a few are, and they're usually just calling it newspapers. Okay. This takes a bit of when you do a search and you're finding online resources. I think so far as I understand, the default wording that you see for something that is technically available online or in your online collection is available online. But I was curious to see, well, what do other people call this? Because as we all know, it's not always available online. And that's why you can see that some of the variants have things like check for availability, check online access, and so yeah, and there's one where actually it's a blank. So basically, there's no available online link in results list. You actually have to click into the full record to see the online access options. And then related to this question is, what happens if you click on the available online link from your results? Do you go straight to the full record, or do you go to the actual content? And if you go to the actual content, it probably means that the library is using direct linking. So, we had a big discussion about this at the ANU about whether we wanted to use direct linking or not. And there's a convenience factor. So, students can avoid the double click. They can just click available online and they can go straight to the resource. But what happens when, there are several resources, and the first one is Factiva, and that's the one that is the default one, unless you make various adjustments, and it may not have as good coverage as some of the other resources. So there are some, and sometimes, or what if there were problems, with the first ranked list, and people may not be informed about the choices that they have for them. And so we tested this for about 3 months, and then we decided to actually discontinue it. So, but yeah, generally looking at the survey, you can see that most of the surveyed libraries, it goes for full record, all results, all options displayed. That means they're not using direct linking. Okay, so the following section is only relevant to the Australian libraries here. So I apologise in advance to our colleagues in New Zealand. Australia and New Zealand have such different histories in terms of our relationships with First Nations people. And so um, that's something that, yeah, I just thought it's safer to focus on the Australian libraries for this one. So I was curious about which Australian libraries have cultural advice embedded in their Primo. And it turns out, so yeah, so there it is. So basically, of the 32 Australian libraries, half of them, 16, have some type of cultural advice or notice or acknowledgement that's actually embedded in Primo. And then all of the 32 libraries actually have some type of acknowledgement on their websites. And this is a bit different from some of um, the questions I had or things I was looking about the technology, but this is something that we're paying attention to keenly, and probably it's something that's always changing too. So that's just what I want to say there. And finally, tags. Um, so basically, only this is something that's not being used so well. Only 2 of the 39 Australian and New Zealand libraries in this survey seem to be using the Primo tags feature, as in that's an option in the top menu. So you can see how Macquarie do it. Language death, ones related to certain courses, um, and authors, and University of South Australia. So yeah, I mean, some of them aren't so helpful, like the great tag. But it's just something to think about. Um, so yeah, um, that's pretty much it from the main part of my presentation. And I realize that I've run a bit early, and that's fine because I see that there are some chats going in, which I was not monitoring. So happy to have a conversation about these issues. But before we go to questions, I just want to say that, yeah, this is something that we'd definitely be happy to share with the ANZREG community because, and I just want to thank everybody who helped us out during 2022 and around then. It was a big job, and we kind of really, lent on ANZREG quite a bit. And so if this is one little way that we can give back, then I'd be happy to do so. So yeah, are there any questions?
I was just browsing through Morgan. There's no questions popping up so far, but yeah, a question for the rest of us if you have any questions for Morgan.
I see. I'm looking at the chat. Okay, from you, Rundle. Yeah, I am. Yeah, um, I'm very open to making this data available, and that way, actually, you can probably get it corrected. And because there will be flaws in it, and maybe some people may be kind of more interested in other features, and it maybe even could be kind of like crowdsourced or something.
There was one question, Morgan, that I missed from Peta. I'll just type it in, pop it in again. Wait a sec. Mhm. So Peter's question is the top 10 discovery collections, counting only top level or sub collections too?
Yes, good question. And basically, no, it was not including sub collections. And so, yeah, if you included sub collections, and that's something you know, that could be a very different number. So, yeah, I just basically did it like that because that top level just seemed like an easier way to compare apples with apples. Ah, licenses display. I know I can tell you that the ANU is using licensed displays, and yeah, it's a, it. But that's not something I checked in this survey. But that is something that somebody could follow up on.
There seems to be one question from Rachel. Can you remind us what was the date the data was collected? If you share the data, could institutions resubmit? See how things have changed.
Yes, so but the initial data was collected probably in a week towards the end of January 2024. And then in the last week, I've basically gone through and have looked at the changes and also added some libraries who were not in the initial survey. Like people like the University of Tasmania who joined Alma after that survey. Um, so yeah, so the refresh happened in the last week. So I'd say actually I put yesterday because I was doing this um, at the last minute. Yeah, I think it's been a bit of work, but it's been helpful that we have this single source of truth. I mean, the alternative might be one of the Spring Share A to Z um, products too. Thank you for sharing that. It is something that, especially comes up when often if we're having issues with, I know, maybe the difficulties accessing things off campus, but we know that the license allows us to send, uh, yeah, items to faculty or students. That's been helpful for all the staff to use. Nice.
Do we have any last questions for Morgan? And maybe we can go for a longer break. But yeah, I'll give you a minute or two. Type in any of your last few questions for Morgan.
I'm curious if anybody has any plans to use the tags, or if people have any thoughts about that. Um, it's the question about whether we've actually used the findings from this survey to inform our choices. I wouldn't say it's been the sole. Okay, interesting. I wouldn't say that this has been the sole kind of thing, but it's been one of the factors in the mix about whether we want to implement something and how we want to do it. So it's certainly been a helpful source of intelligence to kind of look at, well, what are some of our peers doing? And especially with things like the Discovery collections, it made it easy for us to have the argument internally, hey, look, so many people are doing this, we should as well. And I think that actually may have helped there. Hmm, interesting. Now I wish I had actually included the state libraries there, but yeah, it was a busy time. I do not know the question about how recent tags are. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Wow. Well, it makes me wonder if maybe actually tags from their way out a little bit.